Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello and welcome back.
And so we're going to start by talking about La Palma. And, of course, this is one of those topics that it's like Yellowstone.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a big potential item that you always want to talk about it if there's anything happening because, obviously it could have devastating impacts if it is really something that could erupt and cause that mega tsunami. But of course, we don't want to create fear porn just for the sake of fear porn, because you will always get somebody that just says, "See, fear porn,"
Well, I never knew exactly why La Palma was such a big deal, But I guess if that goes, it has kind of like a ricochet effect.
Well, I mean, it could trigger a underwater collapse that would trigger a tsunami for sure. How big, that's debatable. Some scientists give us absolute catastrophic possibilities, and others say it would not necessarily be that severe. Now, it has erupted twice in the last 100 years, and we haven't had that mega tsunami. So, again, doesn't mean it's the end of the world as we know it.
Yeah. I love that song.
Yeah, right? So it does have deformation going on, 10 centimeter uplift. The swarm had died down and now is picking up again, but not quite at the peak level. So it's something to watch. And, we have gotten messages from the guides, and in particular the GFED, and they said most definitely, they told us, watch and be aware of the earth changes because there's technologies being used. And so, artificial flavoring involved most definitely. And we got that this was one that was being artificially flavored.
Mm-hmm. Definitely being manipulated, and something that we need to send our energy out because we don't want anybody getting hurt. There's no reason for it.
Absolutely. And again, this is an absolutely gorgeous area. Amazing natural beauty. It's off the coast of Africa. And this is the National Buoy Center. And there was a buzz about there being so many buoys offline. And you see the ones with the darker reddish orange here. These are stations with no data in the last 8 hours, 24 hours for tsunami stations. If you do see something kind of looking like it's throbbing, that is not good. That says tsunami station in event mode. Thankfully, we don't see that. And so this would be the closest area to where La Palma is. And we do have quite a few that are offline, but, there's always a bunch that are offline, honestly. So again, we'll have to, keep an eye on that. And a lot of eyes are on D.C. for the rally. Heavy police presence, and that's like an understatement. There's been a lot of talk from, different polarities on, what's really going on with this. And of course, they're referencing the January 6th events. Just the police state just keeps getting bigger. That's the, and then so many people are aware and awake to the fact that, there are these events that are perhaps, I mean, how do we say it? Not natural. They are artificial, planned,
yes,
orchestrated. Etc. I mean, this has become part of the mainstream understanding, I think, now. And that those two words, FF, we had talked about fake banners. What's another word for a banner? We pledge allegiance to the. You get it. It's something that was thought to be just in the realm of C period, T period.
Well, what really,
truthers, but now it's just everybody recognizes. I think a lot of people do recognize that there's a historical basis for these triggering events.
Mm-hmm. And what really kind of bothers me about these events is they use people who are who are on a certain side, and they collect them in a database, and these people are out there, bearing their souls, doing what they do for freedom, and they're being put in a database, and it's just not fair. It's not fair the way they're handling all of this.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. As you see here, intelligence collected before the rally suggested that extremist groups such as the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers will turn up. But, there's been a lot of talk, even from number 45, about how, again, this is one of those days that holds potential for those FFs.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Now, this was interesting to see. You see protesters break through a police line. Now, they talk about an officer getting assaulted and trampled by demonstrators. There's another video of this that shows that there was a 70-something-year-old woman that was pulled down by the people that are, quote unquote, enforcing law and order, and kind of beaten and pepper sprayed and left there in the middle of the road. As you see people overrun the powers that be, and this is in Australia, as there's just too many people for them to handle. But some people just seem to enjoy the craziness, and and we're not necessarily talking about people on the protesting side. When you look at it, it's kind of like, I remember my social studies teacher in 9th grade, and a statement he made about the type of people that generally sociologically enter the realm of law enforcement from his perspective. And again, this was his perspective and not mine. A lot of times it's people that you maybe just, they like to have power. Let's just say that they like to feel like they're in a position of authority and power. And sometimes there are abuses, and we have most definitely seen that in the last several years, especially. Lots of abuses of power. I think we could agree to that, looking globally.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's just part of this world that we're living in. Things need to change. Things need to change seriously. The whole system is not salvageable. And that's the bottom line. So what are we looking at there? Are we looking at something, a blast from the past? Are we looking at, some of those infamous NAZI ones?
Mm-hmm.
These camps that they used to stick people in for processing? Well, yeah, this is actually in Australia. And as the quote says here, does it remind you of anything from history? It's massive. Look at all the different parking areas. Look at all the different places for people to come and spend time in detention or mandatory quarantine.
It's just a nice place for people to stay, I'm sure.
Well, they've definitely put a lot of lipstick on it.
They sure did,
so to speak. It's called Howard Springs Quarantine Facility. Now, if you stay here, it's $2,500 per person or $5,000 per couple.
Whoa!
To be quarantined in a little bit of style.
Wow.
And so again, it's a money maker.
Uh-huh. Well, they thought of everything, didn't they?
They sure did. But I mean, we were just looking at that in the last video, how much money has been made by certain entities. And again, these at the very, 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 very top level, ever since we've gotten into this era of the plague upon the land, it's amazing how much money has been made by those in certain industries.
Well, it is irritating to sit and watch people be herded into making more money for these entities and giving them more power. And when you're awake and you understand what's going on, it just rubs against the grain. It's really irritating to watch everybody go along with it.
Mm-hmm. And, here's another interesting topic. U.S. generals are preparing for a space war. They see as all but inevitable. And this, of course, gets into U.S., Russia, China, the usual, but just from space. And showing here a depiction of perhaps a laser weapon from Earth destroying a satellite in space. And then they could go in reverse too, with lasers from space coming down and hitting whatever's on the ground, or perhaps flying in the air. And it gives you different scenarios. But we had talked to the GFED again last night about this very scenario, and it's well known. And I've always had this feeling too. At some time you're going to have you're if you're around, if we're able to make it through the next 5 to 10 years, and we don't know when the timeline is that they're going to roll it out, but at some point in time they're going to roll out beings in front of you that they're going to openly acknowledge these are not human beings from your planet. You know, these are humanoid looking beings, and then they're going to reel them out as the good guys. And they're going to say that really what's going on, and why are all these, you know, tens of thousands of satellites being rapidly put up into space? Well, it's because there's a war that's out there that's coming here. And this is going to be what they tell us. And of course, they're going to portray the ones that have been here the whole time behind the scenes, going all the way back, you know, to the Sumerian times and the talk of the Anunnaki and the Igigi. Well, they're going to portray them as the good guys, and they're going to portray the actual good guys as the bad guys, and they're going to, you know, get us ready to go to war with them against the good guys. Mm-hmm. This is all part of their plan.
And because they have control of the media, they have control of mass communication, they can do that. And that's why it's so important that we kind of stand up and we speak up, because we are all we've got, you guys. We're all we got.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the space battlefield is not science fiction. Anti-satellite weapons are going to be a reality in future armed conflicts. And again, you know, we've talked about how the U.S. itself has more small arms than, you know, say the Russian army or the entire CCP army. But again, what's going to be getting reeled out in front of our own very eyes is weaponry that's going to make that look like it's a non-factor. You know, just even the sheer amount of drones and stuff that have been hidden from the public, as well as advanced military options for these powers that be, will blow people's minds, most definitely. And the reality is, too, there are so many inner Earth beings that are not humans, that are not Homo sapiens, that are, you know, alive here on the planet, in the planet, mm-hmm. as well. So humans and humanity has been given this false idea that we're all alone here. And that's very purposeful, because if we realized that we were sharing the planet with non-terrestrial beings, and beings that have in some capacity the ability to change their vibrational frequency so they can blink out of our reality at will and blink into our reality at will, that would be pretty much something that might
rattle a few cages,
to say the least.
Ruffle some feathers.
Yeah, I'm thinking about people going running and screaming and in all directions. But this is part of what we're going to see. And here it's talking about the U.S. and the long-term strategic competition with rivals Russia and China. But the reality is, again, it's a corporate world. And ultimately, it's a world that is, you know, controlled. And I know there's still a decent part of the population that has a very hard time accepting that non-humans run the show. And many still, as one made a comment, and I know they're being as open-minded as they can, but as they said, I still kind of envision God as a guy with a flowing white beard playing a harp on a cloud. You know, it's what we've been conditioned for. But yet, if we go farther back, there is an invisible war going on. It's been going on forever, and I was questioning Laurel from the GFED, and we were talking about how the original inhabitants of Earth here were not humanoid. Yeah, and this planet was, you know, basically under the control of beings that were serpentine, and you know, this is the reference of the serpent in the Bible. which is referring to beings that are known all over the world and in certain areas of the world as the Nagas. And the Nagas are ancient beings, which a lot of our vampire legends are based on the Nagas. They used to be on the surface of the planet at one time when the sun was different. And what feels right to us, what we've gotten informationally, is the possibility that it wasn't even the sun. The sun perhaps was brought in at a later date. And there are a lot of references that you could put the pieces together and figure out that perhaps the original sun was actually Saturn. And that planets have literally been moved. But we're talking about incredible technologies with beings that are far more ancient than us. And, we're not talking that they're hundreds of years ahead of us. There are beings in play that are millions of years ahead of us. Millions and tens of millions. And just think about the technology that would be involved then. They could rearrange solar systems easily and change things. So at one time, the Nagas could live on the surface, but there was a change in the light that was coming onto the planet, so they had to move into the planet. And when they moved into the planet, there were also wars going on at that time between different factions of reptilians, the Draco, and their minions, who under their control are beings like the Anunnaki and the Igigi. They are kind of a tiered society. Again, it's a society that has given us the whole concept of slavery. And so there were wars going on with humanoid beings, and the original habitation place of humanoids that are in the Pleiades now was not the Pleiades. They moved to the Pleiades after the Lyran Wars because there was a lot of refugees and they needed to resettle somewhere else. And entire planets were wiped out. It's very much, they've given us our own history in so many ways through various movies and different stories. And we could go and we could look again into the Hindu tradition, go into the books like the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and the Bhagavad Gita portion, and we see the wars that were ongoing and these weapons like the Brahmastra, the weapons that burn as bright as 30,000 suns. The wars of the gods were something that was spectacular to behold and very real. And chances are that those that can make it through the next several handful of years, you might at some point in time, if you live long enough, you might actually see the wars of the gods recommence.
Yeah, I think that would be, as long as nobody gets hurt, I think it would be pretty amazing to watch, because we watch some shows like the show Colony, where people are looking up into the sky and they light this thing and it turns out to be a kind of a shield for the planet. And these people get to see that technology, come into play. That was really cool. I think we might be able to see something like that in this lifetime.
Yeah, we're going to see things that are going to blow our minds, but this is what our ancestors saw on the planet. If you go back, to Rama's time, which many experts think was about 7,000 years ago or so, but it could be even farther back than that. It was just known again that these asuras, and the asuras are the ones that are taken to be the more demonic beings, but they're very much just like anybody else, except for they have a lot more technology and they might look a little strange. But they were seen all the time in their flying vehicles. And there was wars between the Asuras and the Devas. And the Devas are the quote-unquote gods, so to speak. And again, everything has been so distorted, we should probably eliminate those words entirely, things like God and gods, and start speaking in a little bit more descriptive term. Like when we're referencing the one source of everything, maybe we have to reference it in that way, because There's been so many different beings that have been represented as the one source that are not the one source. And the one source is within everything in creation as well. So this is one of the biggest hidden truths, hidden in the West, is that all are one ultimately. And, it's just a different way to manifest the one. There's just an infinite a number of possibilities and ways in which the one true source is actually exploring its own creation. But the days of the battles of the quote unquote, well, we could say the powerful ones, if we're going to use one translation of Elohim, the mighty ones. Those days may be coming again, where we see these literal fights in the skies over our heads. And most definitely that will be something that could send you going to the nearest cave.
Yeah, right.
So to speak. And they are getting us ready for this. They are getting us ready for this. And talking about a space arms race. And so checking it out, we've had a decent amount of solar activity. As we see, the KP index had hit 5 there yesterday, a little bit more active. And the day is coming where we're going to be without the grid for a while. Now, this is pasture and range in very poor to poor condition. So you want to see your state in yellow, which is where the farmland, basically the pasture and the range, is still in relatively good condition. So you could see how things look in the West, and it does not look good.
It looks really pretty terrible, and that's super sad, because that's another way that they control people is, through their ability, whether they can get their own food or not get their own food.
And again, people are having to make their own decisions, their best decisions for themselves and their family. And so when you look at a population map, in times like these, the West is probably where most people would want to be from the standpoint of population density. You could, get out there, and we were living in an area where there was, like 2 people per square mile. Literally, hardly anybody around. There wasn't even a whole bunch of 5G towers. So where we were, if we didn't have our Wi-Fi ability, we had no cell phone service, which can be a problem, but it could also lead for peaceful sleeping.
Yes, it did.
And deep meditations as well. But we kind of came halfway back because of the ability to actually grow food, which we're in a zone that gets decent rainfall, and the temperatures are warm, and we're not fighting the drought and the wildfires. But yeah, we will have to, from time to time, fight the storms and fight perhaps major flooding. So again, it's pick your poison. And the ozone hole over the South Pole is larger than Antarctica. It's the biggest since 1979. Disastrous effects for human health, food production, ocean life. And again, I think that there's so much artificial flavoring involved that we can't even know what's natural.
No, we don't.
We can't even know what's natural. And we were watching, I think, I forget what we were watching. Somebody quoted Operation Sea Spray, and they said, look, they quoted Operation Sea Spray to Cindy, because there's 239 times, and this is probably from a couple of years ago, when the government had admitted that it had sprayed different biological agents over its own citizens, just basically to test things. And right there, you have an admission to all the artificial flavoring that's going on around us all the time. So how can we know exactly what is natural and what is Memorex?
I know, because we've kind of been raised in this, I don't know, convoluted world that's been created for us. So it's hard to say.
Yes. Over 5,000 farmlands destroyed by floods, food shortage imminent in Ghana. And, this is, again, a global situation. And yet all we see is just the push for war, the push for spending more on the military. And yet, here we have massive starvation looming. It's just, again, a sign of the absolute sickness that is top down on this planet. And getting back to volcanic activity, we have an eruption at Suwanosejima, and this is in Japan. There's a lot more coming online right now. Iceland's volcanic eruption's the longest in half a century, by the way. So there's more and more volcanic activity coming online, and again, it could be completely enhanced. As we see, new activity unrest reported for 5 volcanoes from September 8th to 14th, and during that period, you had ongoing reported for 17. So, things are most definitely ramping up. There was a 4.4 quake that hit Los Angeles and rattled the area over there, felt widely across the area, no immediate damage. And then there have been so many fireballs, and here we see boom-like sounds associated with fireball over northern Virginia and eastern West Virginia. So many of these fireballs look more like ships than fireballs.
They do.
We've acknowledged that many, many times. And if there is a galactic war going on, which from what we've gotten, yeah, there is still a galactic war underway. The big war never ended. It's still ongoing. And again, here we are. And it makes me think of those little star maps that show the spirals of the Milky Way galaxy, which actually have been shown to be, just even years ago, not as accurate, because I don't know if any of you guys remember, they were telling us that we were here and really we're over there. And they were telling us that we were farther out on a spiral of the arm than we really are. But still, when you look in the bigger terms of things, more than likely there's a lot more civilization down towards the middle of the spiral. And as you get out, just like you get out into the boonies, there's less and less people around. So, if you got dropped in the Australian desert or in the American Southwest, and say this was a post-apocalyptic world, it might take a while before you stumble upon some structures or some other people. Where, of course, if you just got dropped down in the middle of Tokyo or New York City or Rio, you're going to see people right away, or evidence that there were people right away. It's the same thing with the galactic neighborhood. This is just one outpost in this bigger battle that's going on. And this bigger battle, it basically encompasses so many different worlds, different densities. Because, we have seen times where Laurel and her crew up there will be scrambling, and they're normally operating on 5th density, and something is threatening, and they will be scrambling. And even with things happening with the sun. I remember one time they had to scramble because of solar activity and had to move to a different location. And, I made comments talking about how I don't believe the Earth is a plane. It's round, and part of it is because regularly, well, Cindy remembers, but we and others will be up on the ships. And so you get to actually see from above. And I do have memories of looking down. And Cindy has memories of looking down. And we can be pulled. So again, in many of you that have studied UFO cases will know that there's times when the consciousness is pulled, the physical body stays, the consciousness goes up in the ships, and then the consciousness is again brought back into the body. Many cases of sleep paralysis, too, are when things haven't fully merged back and lined up properly as far as the different layers of the etheric body. But many people have memories of seeing, things up on the ships and looking out the window and seeing the Earth as a spherical object. So again, it's from experience. And that's why, for instance, I have, and Cindy has, no doubt about certain ET races because we've seen them multiple times. And, so, and again, we don't think that they're demonic because we've also experienced demons, which are of a different vibration, different frequency. So it's just the same thing. If you think back to when the first white men were going down and they heard all these rumors of, for instance, gorillas, but they weren't really sure what it was. They just hear these rumors of these big, powerful, um, beings that represent uh, what we now know to be a gorilla, but you don't have that classification yet. Yet now we could classify and say that's a gorilla, that's a monkey, that's a chimpanzee, that's a rhesus monkey. We have all those classifications where we could be very, very specific. And so it's the same thing. There are beings from all different places. We could say, okay, well, that's an Andromedan, that's a Pleiadian over there, there's an Arcturian. That right there is, there's so many different classifications of the grays, alone. And the grays, by the way, I've been meaning to do a video on them because unfortunately, there's very few grays out there that have any sort of true essence left to them.
Mm-hmm.
They're basically completely assimilated into the Borg and into this AI structure that they do want to assimilate humanity into too. That's part of the ongoing process. So the ultimate goal, dark side goal, is basically assimilation. It's one of assimilation and assimilating humanity so that humanity becomes like the Greys, just tools, just workers, to the point where there's no longer really a soul in there. And many of them are biological, but they're also robotic / android. They're a combination, and this is part of the singularity. This is part of what we're being sold by Mr. Musk as well as others. Hey, something goes wrong with your heart, we'll replace it. Something goes wrong with your lungs, we'll replace it. We'll replace everything until there's just nothing left but that, little bit
Yep.
of consciousness running this, what becomes a bot.
Yeah, just make everything mechanical, make everything replaceable, just like a car,
Yep. And so we're a little bit off on tangents there, but there's so much that we have to share with you guys. So yeah, many reports of boom-like sounds associated with a couple of fireball sightings from Northern Virginia on the 17th and over into the West Virginia line area. Interesting. So they say it was the same brightness as a full moon. And pretty big booms going on now. Too, that there's areas out here which, in the case of a major disaster or war, there's a lot of secret bases over in the West Virginia area that the government would be basically evacuated to and taken underground to. And so, yeah, you gotta wonder what's really going on. And I just wanted to end on this note, and I'll share the link with you guys. I'm not sure if this is safe to play, but it shows a hawk coming in, and the hawk tries to steal a chicken. A rooster comes to the rescue. Mm-hmm. The rooster does his best, but then the goat comes and rams him. And so the goat saves the day, and they run the hawk off. Now, yes. Talk about working together.
This is what we need to do. We need to watch the farm animals, and we need to remember and work together. And this is a really cute thing, you guys. Please watch. It's a lot of fun.
It is. And we have to get beyond the labels. They always want us fighting, and they want us thinking in terms of, okay, well, I'm a Russian, or I'm an American, or, I'm a Brazilian. And, it's the people of the world have to recognize that the manipulation is all about keeping us under control. It's all about keeping us under control. Even with those that are pro-V or anti-V. It's all about, separate, divide, and conquer. And the quicker that we realize that, and this is why we harp so much on the fact that, we feel like it's necessary that people delve a little bit deeper, get outside of your comfort zone, because yeah, there are some that want to just completely believe in, whether they believe literally there was a Noah and an Adam and an Eve, and yet we see that those stories come from older Sumerian stories with different names, same basic gist, but just they have to have their dogma. And this goes also for Islam or anything at all, any particular dogmatic way of looking at things. And you could break it into Hinduism too, because you have Vaishnavites, Shaivites, Shakti followers as well. There's different groupings of it, and as long as we take a fundamentalist aspect on it and say ours is the only one true way, then we're again dividing ourselves up and not seeing the bigger picture. When the realization comes that we're not alone, and we're only one tiny little outpost among countless outposts, then basically you got to get to the core, and the core is love. If you view source as love and compassion, then that's really all we need to take from it. There's some basic simple truths there, dealing with respecting others, and sharing and working together. I think the best analogy we could have is recognize it. And this is one of the things that's come through from talking to the Galactics and talking to the Devas, those of the higher vibrational realms. They understand that we are all cells in a bigger body. So we're either operating in a symbiotic relationship where everything is working towards keeping the whole healthy, or we're acting exactly in the opposite way, and we're acting like the cancer that's raging in the body. We have to realize and recognize that these dark energies, the draconian way of doing things, is operating as a cancer. It's a self-destructive. Ultimately, it's self-destructive. There's no other way around it. It just leads to death and destruction, and it leads to isolation, and there's nothing benevolent in it. We have to recognize again, and just looking at the planet itself, when you view the planet as your mother of the physical body, then everything that we're doing on this planet doesn't make any sense. We're not living in harmony with the mother. And really, it's all about healing the mother first, because the mother has been attacked by the dark side, because this is how they separate us from her. They demonize her. Well, just call God source in a masculine way. Just think of it in a masculine way. Our Father, our Father. It sounds like it's trivial, but the reality is, when you remove the mother, you remove compassion, you remove love, you remove living in a symbiotic, harmonious way.
Right. Very important that we learn about oneness. We learn about love. We learn about tolerance. We allow other people to have their hang-ups. People go through things in life. They get traumatized and they have hang-ups. And, the more mature you are, the more mature you can be, the more you can be accepting of people's hang-ups and just love them for who they are anyway. They're having trouble loving themselves, but you can love them until they can love themselves. And that's where we need to get to that point where we have a true understanding of other people, and then we accept them no matter what. Just no matter what. I love you. Okay, be as weird as you want. I love you no matter what.
And we could love people even when they think that they're in the right, but they're actually creating more division. Yet at the same time, it can be difficult, because how can we go on with more division and make any sort of progress?
Mm-hmm.
So this is why we are trying to get people to wake up to the fact that if you take that strong fundamentalist stance in any one direction, then you're never going to heal the division.
Exactly.
You are a part of the division.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to recognize that, because then you can be used easily to create more confrontation, more destruction, more death, and more violence. You know, when we look to the taking of the Americas from the people that were here, that was an atrocity. And you know, to some, again, to some of the lay people, they were justifying it by saying that they were coming to save souls, but really they were coming to rape, pillage, and plunder, take the land, take the natural resources, and to set up again in a new place their own form of self-serving government. And this is completely the draconian way of doing things.
It is. And I think one thing that if people could learn to do is when you see things going on around you that you disagree with, you know, take your own inventory first. See how you are in your life and what can you do to maybe remedy the situation. I think we kind of get at each other a little too much. You know, we get busy pointing out. And if you are pointing one finger out, you got 3 or 4 pointing back at you. So we all need to be accepting and tolerant of certain things. And there's definitely a balance there. There's definitely a balance that can be found.
But we don't want to accept tyranny.
Right.
So here is where we need to speak up and do it in such a way that we wake up as many as possible. Because again, you could see if we go back to what happened in that one video where we saw that the overwhelming flood of people was too much for the power structure to hold back. That's exactly what needs to happen in a global way, in such a way that it's a tidal wave of awakening to the bigger picture of how we've been totally controlled. Don't allow yourself to go down and become just another cancerous cell. We have to get back into harmony, and that will take removing yourself from the cancerous situation, and that is the system itself.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to fix it. It's broken beyond repair, so it's going to have to go. That's the bottom line, and we're going to have to come up with alternatives and work on these alternatives and have people joining the alternatives, becoming part of the alternatives to the point where the system itself is insignificant.
Right.
As always, guys, thanks for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. Check out Medicinal Foods. Links on the top of every video. God bless and namaste.
Namaste.